The royalty and streaming sector made headlines in 2022 with lots of deals with high precious metal prices. Does the M&A continue? I'm with Irfan Kazemi. He is CFO of Sandstorm Gold Royalties. Irfan, welcome to Kitco.
Great, thanks for having me.
Irfan, thumbnail, Sandstorm Gold Royalties. What's the company do, and what are some of your top assets?
Yeah, happy to. We're a royalty and streaming company, which means we built a portfolio of a few hundred royalties, and they're structured where we get a certain percentage of the revenue from the operations. We have over 39 that are producing right now, and we've deployed over $1 billion of capital in the last 12 months. And so we've built up a pretty diversified portfolio. You know, if I spoke to you a year ago, I'd be focusing on maybe a couple of our assets, but now we've built this incredibly diverse portfolio where no one asset accounts for more than 15% of our NAV. And so, you know, we've got assets like Antamina in the portfolio, which is the third largest copper mine in the world. We've got, you know, world-class development projects like Platte Reef that are being developed by Ivanhoe, and Greenstone with Equinox. And we also have some wonderful development assets in Hot Maden, which is fully permitted now, has its key permit. So a really diverse base of assets that we've been able to acquire.
2022 was remarkable just for mergers and acquisition in the gold and royalty streaming sector. I think about your acquisition of Nomad, Great Bear Royalties went to Royal Gold, and then Triple Flag and Mavericks.
Yeah, it tended to be a theme of consolidation over the last 18 months. And I think a lot of that was being telegraphed over many years. You had a lot of entrants in the royalty space, and each of the royalty companies had their unique reason for the M&A that they did. Some are, you know, diversifying their asset base. As I mentioned earlier, we look to ensure that our diversification and the quality of our assets were such that our top 10 assets, more than half of them in the first quartile. And then you had a lot of more junior royalty companies out there, and I think the understanding is over time they'll consolidate too, just because of it makes sense in the royalty space. And you're candidly seeing that, and not just in the royalty space, but in other mining sectors as well.
Talk about a bit of the operations, the mechanics, Irfan, with a gold and royalty streaming company. A company comes into and is looking for funding. You know, at what stage does a company need to be at before you look at it?
Yeah, my answer maybe a few years ago would have been different. We were allocating some of our capital to some junior exploration companies, ones that had advanced exploration or EPC development in a few years' time. And that was a time when that optionality was incredibly cheap, and we were building a portfolio that now as we hit closer to $1,900 gold, and you see gold prices continue to move up in the long run, those assets now are starting to come to the forefront, and you see financing. But when we look at our portfolio today, we're solely focused on allocating capital to projects that are cash flowing or near term cash flowing, just in the stage of the company that we're in right now. And so there's other royalty companies out there where they might be looking at advanced exploration, but for Sandstorm Royalties, we are really looking for cash flowing assets.
That's interesting, because I would have thought when you get to a particular type of scale, then you would be able to go further back. You know, if you know, when you have the capital to allocate.
Yeah, that tends to be a part of the cycle, but we were very serendipitous in when the commodity prices declined significantly, and you had a lot of these advanced exploration projects available, and there wasn't much equity or capital available to them. That's when we started allocating capital, and that's where we were able to build a portfolio of 250 royalties and streams, because we took those opportunities to allocate capital in that time. Now I think what you're seeing is there is fewer projects coming out in the forefront that are pure gold mining projects. Some of them that are the largest in the world, like Platte Reef, and you're looking at projects like Greenstone here in Canada. We've put streams in place, so as they get developed and they start producing into next year, you can see some of that cash flow come back. But right now, as boring as it may sound, we took on some debt to do some of those acquisitions over the last year. And our plan is to just use the tremendous amount of cash flow we're getting on a monthly basis to pay down our debt over the coming year.
There's been a real sea change in terms of the junior resource space the latter half of 2022 when you had interest rates hikes and just disappearing of liquidity and just disappearing of being able to kind of finance projects right now. Mentioned at the top of the interview, we had the strong start to the precious metal prices. Looking broadly at the junior space, is a little bit better for them right now? Do they have more options regarding debt, or do they have regard to doing equity raises or something like that? Or is it still pretty hard to be an exploration company raising funds?
No, there is some capital available, small pockets available to allocate to advanced exploration stories that make sense, that that meet the criteria of, what are the costs associated with access to infrastructure? Is this a deposit that can actually change the communities around them? What is the scale? And so there is a certain amount of capital available, but I think what you're noticing now is capital is becoming harder to obtain when interest rates are increasing. And that's not surprising. That I think people understand that concept. But what that might lead to is more M&A that happens. You're seeing that maybe in the more senior space. You could see that happening in the more mid-tier space. And eventually, as some of that capital becomes tighter, especially to develop these projects, there's less capital available for exploration. And as that dries up, it might make sense to combine some of these junior companies as well.
Irfan, you said that the company has changed in terms of a couple of years ago when you might have looked at the stage of a project, a stage that a junior's at, in terms of what you're looking at it now. How are you looking, or how's the company rather looking at political risk?
Yeah, political risk is an important one. We have stringent due diligence process that we follow, certainly. But, over the last decade as CFO at Sandstorm, what's really solidified my understanding of political risk is there is no perfect jurisdiction anywhere. They all have their unique characteristics in terms of political risk. But when we look at it, I find the best way to insulate yourself against political risk is a portfolio approach. And so you can add assets in different parts of the world and you get that diversification benefit. But like many other companies out there are certain countries that are just no-goes, certain parts of Africa or Asia that just doesn't meet our criteria, or we're not able to contractually mitigate the risk associated with those countries.
Now, you're also CEO of Horizon Copper. Maybe you can talk about how that company fits within Sandstorm.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. 18 months ago, we came to the realization of a couple of things. One is many people out there, is the energy transition that's coming. Based on the work our technical team had done and the research we've done, we really became believers in the deficit that the copper markets are hitting. And then when you step back and you look at the power grid, and you look at how much copper you need just to maintain GDP over the next few decades, and you start layering all this together and how the world needs to make that energy transition with onshore and offshore and how much copper intensive it is, we really stepped back and said, well, how can we help be part of that solution while making investors money? And Horizon Copper was birthed through that idea of an aggressive consolidator of copper interests all over the world, and helping finance those acquisitions will be Sandstorm through a precious metal stream. And the beauty of copper assets is they come with precious metal byproduct. And so there's this natural harmony that exists where Horizon can go acquire copper assets and then use a low form of cost of capital via stream or royalty to help finance that acquisition.
Is there any assets that you want to highlight within Horizon Copper, Irfan?
Yeah, it's closing its last part of its RTO this year in the first half, and out of the gate, it's going to have 3 first quartile assets, from interest in Antamina, which is the 3rd largest copper mine in the world, to Oyu Tolgoi, which I'm sure people are quite familiar with, to Hot Maden, which is for another first quartile asset that's now has all its key permits. And so it's a unique story that has 3 world-class assets in it, and we're really excited to add more assets to that portfolio in the next 24 months. And the key of Horizon is it's got a multi-billion-dollar funding partner via Sandstorm to help Horizon acquire those assets, and so we're quite excited.
Lastly, copper has been a hot metal, Irfan. I don't need to tell you. What's the one data point or what's the one trend that excites you most about copper?
It's one of those metals where it's not only critical in the energy transition, but it's very challenging to innovate your way out of. It is a metal that with some other battery metals, you can make a case that there's innovation involved and you may require less of it. But copper is one of those that we're going to need that metal in order to build out the transmission lines and to do the cabling. And so I am a little concerned in terms of the amount of copper that's needed to meet our energy transition goals and where we're going to get it. But I'm also excited to be a part of that and be part of that solution. And I think copper is going to do quite well over the medium and long term.
Irfan, thanks for your time with Kitco.
Thank you. Pleasure.
He's Irfan Kazemi. He is CFO of Sandstorm Gold. My name's Michael McRae. You're watching Kitco Mining.